Okay. So thank you and congratulations to IAP Kerala, and the doyens of pediatrics are you, not me. I mean, I'm just struggling and I'm surviving, and I really feel that so privileged to be here to talk about child rights and how we can work together. And Dr. Bennet, Dr. Ashok Kumar, Dr. M. Narayanan, Dr. Anandakesavan, Dr. Jayaraman, and Dr. Balachandran, we need your support. The child abuse group here needs your support. Let me start with a small story. When I came back from the US and I met my teachers from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And one of the first I met was Dr. O.P. Ghai. If you remember, he was also the past president. And he was writing his book, Essentials Pediatrics. And he asked me, my book is like the Bible. I said, no, sir. He says, what? So he expected me. So I said, sir, there is no chapter on child rights or abuse. And he said, wow. So would you write it? Sure. So I had no experience in as being a professor or something, but I started writing. And thanks to the team at All India Institute, I continue to write on child rights. But my real mentor in this field is Professor R.N. Srivastav, and he's right here. And thank you, Dr. Srivastav, for joining this meeting. Dr. Srivastav and I met over a cup of tea in the Apollo Hospital. And I asked him, doctor, these hospitals are fine, but I want to work for the underprivileged children. And he immediately connected to the child abuse group, and it had been formed under the leadership of Dr. Srivastav when he was the president in 1996 of the IAP. The group was struggling, but with help of Dr. Srivastav and our team, we were able to, and Dr. S.R. Banerjees, Dr. R.N. Salan, and lots of other leaders, Dr. Narayanan, I believe, and all the other people, we were able to form this group. And fortunately, I would say I had the great visionaries, Dr. Shanti Ghosh, we should remember, who actually took part in a lot of our deliberations and advice, and they were advisors of our group, still continue to support us. So thank you very much. And I would like you to spend some time reading about this subject, but I would like all of you to join this group, and Ashok will be the first person who's going to guide you. We are talking about United Nations Convention on the Rights of Child. We're talking about that India signed this declaration in 1992. And when you sign the declaration, you're bound by implementation by the international law. And it has implications on policy and legal processes. And it's a great document. Since it's almost 30 years, it has changed the laws of several countries. This document has 54 articles, 4 general principles of non-discrimination, best interest of the child, that's Article 3, right of life, survival and development, Article 6, right to be heard. So you see, this is a very, very important document that India has signed, and we as pediatricians and custodians of child health and welfare need to ensure that these child's rights are realized. Child rights, we don't see, it's a fundamental to our pediatric practice. But still it is not acknowledged or respected by pediatricians. The rights of every child include, the basic ones includes child right to survival, identity, development, protection, and participation. And these are the core rights that we as pediatricians have very important role but we need to know the language of these rights. We need to have adequate knowledge. And then we see this happening every day, whether we are in clinical practice or research, academics, public health or policy matters, and a variety of clinical settings. We have to use these pieces of document to become effective advocates for children and the families in the country. As pediatricians, we should need to be getting trained, even if you have not been trained in medical school about this, but you need to have a copy of this. It can be downloaded easily today, or you can go to your local UN office, UNICEF office to get a hard copy. But basically, the field is really rapidly progressing, and with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which have now replaced the Millennium Development Goals, we need to understand that we need to achieve these goals. And nobody is going to achieve them for us if we don't make our concentrated, joint, multidisciplinary efforts. So pediatricians need to realize that they alone need support from the local, state, national, international representatives if they want to advance child rights. I'm so proud that you have a book on child rights, and we've Dr. Srivastav and colleagues have talked about child rights, but it's high time that we start realizing them for children. Maybe I can show you in the Indore Pedicon, this small book is a booklet which you can carry in your coat pocket on child abuse. Recognition and response was supported by the UNICEF. It has got standard operating protocols, and this cost about 290 rupees, and all the donations that come. We have already sold out about 1,000 copies, and all that goes into the ICANCL. ICANCL group doesn't get any kind of donations from pharmaceutical companies, and we always struggle. So please do buy a copy, and I'll give you the link to this. This is a huge big chapter, and I've intentionally kept it like this. I'm not going to tell you article 1 to 34. These article 1 to all these articles which I mentioned basically are articles which protect child's right to health. I mean, there are 54 articles, that 34 of them are totally dedicated to child health, and we need to. I will send you these slides. I've already sent the slides to Dr. Ashok and Bennet, and I'm free to distribute them to the network of IAP Kerala. And, if I would spend time in discussing individual rights, it's going to take forever. So we thought, switch over to child abuse, which is a major violation. Child abuse is a major violation of child rights. And according to the WHO definition, it includes all forms of physical, emotional, sexual, and even child neglect, treatment, or commercial or other forms of exploitation of the child. Results in actual or potential harm to the child's health, survival, development, and dignity in the context of relationship of power, trust or power. So while this is a big definition, but you should realize that in our country, violations of child rights, rights to basic education, this was missing in our country when we started working in the ICANCL group. It was actually we started the first Congress on putting every child in school, and lots of efforts with several NGOs and nonprofits. Finally, the law which came, the Right to Education Act. And then we are still struggling that we need to realize the right to health for all children in this country. So the child abuse focusing is Ashok has already mentioned, this is the only study we have in 2007. So what is holding back the government to publish a revised study? It's been several years. Can you believe that physical abuse was present in 66%? About more than 40% children have experienced sexual and emotional abuse, and child neglect is widely prevalent. But you need to realize that child trafficking, exploitation, child labor, child marriage, commercial and online sexual exploitation, you cannot, in the times of COVID, the online sexual exploitation of children has increased more than 100%. And we have an important role in prevention and response. Child abuse has short-term and long-term consequences. It can lead to regressive behaviors, developmental milestones will regress, child can return to bedwetting, thumb sucking, sleep disturbances, eating disorders. If the child is older, he can have problems in schools, sexualized behavior. It can have long-term effects on their mental, physical health, reproductive, and academic progress, and social functioning. There are adverse childhood experiences. This is a study. You cannot be a child abuse pediatrician today in the world without knowing what the A study is. This is an American epidemiology study, which has shown that if children are abused and neglected in the first few years of their life, in the first 18, as children, they will develop adult onset diseases such as high blood tension, diabetes, coronary artery disease, depression, and substance abuse. And how does this take place? It takes place with generation of toxic stress and epigenetic changes. So new research has shown that childhood adversity places a child at immense risk to development of toxic stress, epigenetic mutations, even disruptions in brain architecture, which can lead to poor adult outcomes. So all these whole non-communicable disease epidemic that we are seeing in our country could also be due to abuse and neglect of children in early childhood. So this goes on to say that as pediatricians, as medical doctors, we need to prevent child abuse and neglect in early childhood. Child abuse is extremely important. And the crucial role of physicians is always has been discussed, but pediatricians, have not taken this into their mainstream of pediatric training and response. And therefore, I'm really proud of IAP Kerala and all you that you take this as a Child Rights Week. And congratulations once again to you. As pediatricians, we are all the first point of contact. We are the people who can diagnose and manage these and make multidisciplinary referrals. We need to be connected to the various child protection systems, if you are very busy, if you're seeing 200 patients a day, you need to have a number of child 91098 and refer the children there. If you need to have numbers of child welfare committees, the police and legal support systems that the child would need. Any child can come in abuse state, in bleeding state, and you need to save the lives of these children. But you need really realize that child abuse is and especially now we have a new law, and I'll talk about that. Child sexual abuse is a medical legal emergency. Now we're going to, as pediatricians in clinical practice, to make the talk more interesting and probably give you a more overview of what physical abuse is. I wanted to talk about this is abused physically when a child is beaten. Corporal punishment is one of the commonest causes where children are beaten all over the place, whether in homes and school settings, everywhere. Here, sometimes when the parents bring their child and you are the doctor and you see an injury, you need to understand, you need to take a history. And if you find the history has no explanation for the significant injury, for example, the child has fallen and from the bed and he has have a major head injury, you also need to rule out abuse. And when there is inconsistent explanations, denial of trauma, and the history is not matching your exam findings, you need to suspect physical abuse. And there are certain rules, and this is a formula which is called 10-4. Like any bruise which you see on the torso, ears, or neck, or if you see in a child who's less than 4 months or a child who's less than 4 years, and in these regions is very highly suspicious. You will see a lot of bruises in children on the shins and all. That's not the problem. The problem is a preambulatory child. If a child with multiple organ injuries, multi-system, and various kinds of fractures, if you see in various stages of healing, patterned injuries, these are injuries in the non-bony locations. So these are very suspicious of physical abuse. I will give you some you can see a child has been beaten, and you can see that, you can see this, strangulation here. And this is a child who's immersed in a hot tub of water. And you can see the delay in seeking care is sometimes very evident. And also by the x-rays, you can see the child presents late and the healing is, and the fracture, you need to suspect why this delay. So I'll take you some situations and talking a 4-month-old child who found this morning by a mother, and he has red swollen thigh. His tender is not moving. And this is your x-ray. Are you going to just dismiss this to the refer to orthopedics, or are you going to do something more? I think a time has come that you need to know what are inflicted injuries and what are not inflicted. Any injury in a non-walking child, when any injury with no trauma history, you need to suspect. And you need to suspect child physical abuse, and you need to understand, you need to offer protection to this child from abuse, because these injuries can be repeated in more severe times, smaller, milder injuries or sentinel injuries, and you need to have those. Child physical abuse will need another hour or two to discuss, but I'll just go through very quickly with few slides. This is another situation of a 2-year-old who fell from the bed, comes with abdominal pain, vomiting, and fever, high fever and tachycardia. And this is the x-ray. As you confirmed ruptured jejunum, are you going to just refer to pediatric surgeon? Are you going to do something more? You need to understand the injury mechanisms. Are they inadequate? You need to see what complications are due to delayed care. You need to understand the epidemiology also. And especially in infants less than 2 years, the head injuries could be very serious. 80% of the inflicted injuries, if you have not heard about this, it's time that we need to read about this. Inflicted abdominal injuries are also very common. And we need to understand there is something called abusive head trauma. This is a story of an 8-month-old child who fell from the bed, was unconscious, erratic breathing and seizures. And this was a CT scan. And you can see on the top, there's a bleeding focus. Now, these are important things that we need to understand. You can see this is previously called shaken baby syndrome, but now universally called as abusive head trauma. And there's a lot of right now discussions, and there's some people still don't call it a medical disorders, and the others do. But majority, and there's a policy of the American Academy of Pediatrics will have come out. And I think India needs to do more research on this. And you cannot just easily say that child abusive head trauma doesn't occur, because studies from Des Runyan, who's was my co-counselor in the ISPAN, the International Society in Lucknow, and also in Nagpur, with our fellow pediatricians, have shown that in children of corporal punishment and also children who were subjected to physical discipline, there was a high incidence of abusive trauma. You know, child needs to be seen carefully, analyzed carefully, the history of shaking. If sometimes we do not find any trauma, but if you find retinal hemorrhages, if you find this child is altered sensorium, this child can actually get into a permanent neurocognitive deficits and even death if you don't able to intervene early. Use a standard lab features, CBC, lab tests that blood hemocoagulation profiles. You must read out any bleeding coagulation disorder. X-rays are very, very crucial. You need to know about skeletal X-rays, because especially in children less than 2 years, you can do the whole complete skeletal survey. And these can see various kinds of fractures. The list could be depending to where you need, but in a child less than 2 years, specifically a whole skeletal survey will give you. The CT scan remains the first preferred, and CT scan is cheaper and it identifies acute hemorrhages early, and you need to assess this. MRI for head is important if you suspect intracranial or cerebral this thing, and can be done if you want to supplement, but first line of investigation is CT scan. So having done this exam and invited your interest into this subject, you need to assess if the child is clinically stable. If he has a life-threatening injury, you need to get your emergency ICU care, intensive care, and you need to make sure that child gets everything that is needed to save his life. You need to assess this child through safety lens. Whether the child is safe at home, there is no law right now that a child cannot be beaten at home. But there's a law about right to education, in which if a child is beaten in school, the teachers could be punished. But if it's a grievous trauma, there are enough laws in our country to make a medico-legal report in these cases, and police reporting as well. Switching gears to child sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse, by definition, is now basically defined under the protection of children from sexual offenses. But basically, the POCSO includes both penetrative and non-penetrative sexual contact. It also includes the sexual harassment and child pornography. The development of a child varies from age, and many times they cannot fully comprehend what the offenders are doing to them, how they are grooming. They are not able to give any kind of consent. And basically, it's a law against child sexual abuse. So there could be severe punishments. So this is a current standard definition under the POCSO. Any sexual activity with a child, whether a girl or a boy, less than 18, is a crime. And section 3 says penetrative sexual assault, section 7, sexual assault, sexual harassment, section 11, and use of child for pornography. So different grades of punishment, and the punishments are severe. If you are a medical doctor, police, or any teacher, or any person who's supposed to be a professional, who's supposed to protect this child, and if you are caught and that person is caught, the punishments are severe, even life imprisonment if the child is very young. Now, child sexual abuse occurs in secrecy, and that's something, it occurs by someone the child already knows, could be a parent, step-parent, relative, neighbor, in teachers. It occurs in a variety of settings, including homes, schools, workplaces. And these offenders come from all walks of life, and you cannot be picked by their appearance. So it's a very, very difficult diagnosis to make. There are several risk factors. There are different studies, single parents, any classes, low education, street children, substance abuse, parents sick. But one thing you must realize that child sexual abuse occurs in all classes. It occurs in low income, poor, marginalized communities, in middle class families, and also in the rich family. So it breaks those class barriers. Now, to invite your interest to child sexual abuse, let's talk of this case. Suman, 12-year-old girl, who's brought to you by her aunt, and she reveals that her dad has been sexually abusing for the last 3 years. Now, this mom, she told her mom, but mom did not do anything. And this aunt has brought, now how are you going to do this? What are you going to do this? But because you speak to Suman, she denies this. Now, if you're a very busy pediatrician with 100 patients a day, you certainly would not be having even time. But what you really need is, this is a medical legal emergency. It's not just because the child is not bleeding, but you need to find special time, and you need to give them adequate privacy, confidentiality, and you need to obtain a history in a non-judgmental manner, and it should be such that the child doesn't get traumatized. So you essentially need to practice this trauma-informed care in each and every child. So what is disclosure? Disclosure means that when child opens up, that he or she, the child opens up that he or she is being sexually abused. Now, remember one thing, many pediatricians always stay away and hide these incidents under the carpet, but no longer, because we have the POCSO Act. And child sexual abuse, you should not worry, because its diagnosis is mainly by history. 95% of the cases you can diagnose by history. And if you're not comfortable with sexual exams, there's so many people who can do it around your hospital. But you need to realize that you should be the first offender to report. And you report to the police, and I can briefly tell you about that. But this again we have 1-day workshops, we have 2-day workshops. Now we have a 3-day workshop during the COVID times. So you're welcome to join us and write to us, and we'll be happy. Many reasons a child will not disclose, because these offenders use a method of grooming, which they build a trust with the child, and this they do in such a way that their engagement with the child remains confidential, and the child doesn't reveal, and they continue to use their influence and power over this child. There could be lots of other cultural, social taboos, and when we in our culture believe that it's a fault of the children, and the adults are always right. So it could be a lot of factors why they will not disclose. So you need to be smart. You need to use the histories, and pediatricians are smart, aren't they? They are the people who know how to talk to a child. I have yet to see any doctor who, you don't need to be taught. You just need to be practicing pediatrics. Over the years, your skills of practicing trauma-informed care, everything increases. But this is a specific situation which you really need to, their history is the most important thing. But then if there's a history that somebody actually saw, if a child is young and comes to you with pregnancy, the child has sexually transmitted diseases, then you must suspect definitely this child's sexual assault has taken place. Now, there are lots of history mechanisms, physical symptoms, recurrent bleeding, injuries, urinary infections, recurrent genital infections, recurrent somatic symptoms, recurrent headaches, or all kinds of things can give rise to suspicious diagnosis of child sexual abuse. There are behavioral indicators. The child will suddenly withdraw from the social activities, will refuse school participation, eating disturbances, developmental regression, sexualized behavior, and self-harm, even substance abuse. So coming to one other interesting case on child sexual abuse, a 9-year-old girl tells her parents that a teacher in the school calls the students to his room and fondles them all over the body. And when these 2 students have refused to go to his room, he started targeting them, he insults them, he punished them for trivial reason. He tells other teachers how these students are in disciplined and poor state. Now, this is something, it's not something I've made up. It's a real story. And if something happens, what you need to do, POCSO rule applies, and you need to just file a report. And that's all you. The FIR and other matters will be taken care of by the police. Most of our doctors hide this, and they don't do it because they don't want to get into legal issues. But the thing is, you're going to have more legal issues if this is disclosed elsewhere. Because if you were in contact and if the law comes on you, 6 months in jail, about 30,000 or it's 20,000 rupees fine. Pediatricians will not bother with the fine, but look at your reputation is at stake. So how can you not disclose to the, and you need to report. Talking to the child needs a very small, traumatized child needs trauma-informed care. You can't have a standard history of, fever, cold, infections. It should be non-leading, non-suggestive. You should make the child comfortable, give privacy. Ideally, it is great to have the child just with you. But if you don't, then you take that parent whom you really suspect is the child is who's a non-offending. Sometimes one of the parents could be the offenders. So you need to have that adult with you. And when you take a good history, you need to build your rapport, and you need to be talking about, let the child open up. And it's sometimes not easy. The child goes through severe emotional stress, is hungry. You can offer some food or water or whatever, but just make the child comfortable. If the child doesn't reveal, it's okay. You will have more opportunities. So this is very important. And if your hospital has one-stop centers, these are government approved, Ministry of Women and Child, there each and every district is going to have one-stop centers. The Indian Council group has trained several one-stop centers. I myself visited several one-stop centers. And this importance is that the people who are working in these stop centers, OSCs we call them, are not greatly trained. But it's history taking is an art, and it's a science that pediatricians should use. So you join a network and be a part. You should always keep the developmental assessment and the cognitive competence in your mind when you review. And therefore, I think you are the best judges. Sometimes you should, in fact, majority of the time, you make anatomical diagrams. You can actually ask where the offender actually touched this child. And the child should be assured that they are not to be blamed. And you believe their accounts. A child has to be believed. So role of pediatricians is extremely important. We are mandated to report to the legal authority as the law passed by the Act of Parliament, which is the POCSO Act by 2012. And as physicians, we need to provide medical care, suspected victims and legal, whatever we need to do. And we need to focus on therapeutic care. If the child is bleeding, you give emergency care, attend to the injuries, give them prophylaxis for HIV and STIs, whatever is needed, pregnancy, contraceptions, ask your friends, colleagues, get mental health referrals. And then you, according to the POCSO Act, if you are a doctor, you need to correct forensic evidence as well. There is said that the child whose abused is a female, then you need a female doctor, but the female doctor is not available. The male doctor can examine and file a report. So there is a great thing in our book here, which I said, there's a great flow chart, and you will get all the procedures, how you collect the evidence. There's something called Safe Kit, which is like a set of tools. You've done sutures, you've done that, and through that you collect, you get some samples, and you have to just put them in and submitted them. So there are now guidelines given by the Ministry of Health for sexual violence for all doctors, MBBS and above. And I think pediatricians are very highly and have advanced training, and certainly those guidelines have to be followed. So I mentioned this is the book. You can read that in your spare time, and you keep it a hand copy. This is emotional abuse. It goes on. It's one of the most hidden form of maltreatment, but sexual abuse is also associated with the physical emotional abuse. Behavior such as rejection, ignorance, shame, guilt, humiliation, this happens all the time. And this can happen with other kinds of physical or sexual abuse. And it occurs again, with the stigma which is associated with revealing and the secrecy that goes around these issues. And when you see inappropriate behavior or dramatic changes in the behavior of your patients, aggressive, uncooperative behavior, loss of urine bowel controls, destructive, antisocial, lack of peer supports, poor self-confidence, all these things, failing grades, you need to suspect any kind of hidden emotional abuse. Irrational fears of the child, persistent sadness, desperately seeking affection, confused, disoriented. When you don't find any evidence on organic features, you need to look at emotional abuse. And again, there's a flow chart in our book, and you can read that. I won't go into this. Trauma-informed care is critical. You need to ask questions which do not re-traumatize this poor child. He's suffered enough. Open-ended questions. You need to be very, very careful what you ask, and you need to. These are the 4 R's of trauma-informed care: realize, recognize, respond, and resist. And I want to tell you that the Indian Council group is almost about, in collaboration with our one of our mentors, he's Professor Shekhar Shishadri. We are about to create whole a module on trauma-informed care for IAP and also for IMA and also FOXY and all the medical societies, how to do trauma-informed care. Now, you need to know when you refer. We can't become a doctor of mental health, but we are the first people. We can do the band-aid care. We should assess the stress, but if the stress is persisting for longer time, if there is no recovery, depression going on, post-traumatic stress disorder, psychotic behaviors, or suicidal tendencies, you see, immediately refer. Child may need even hospitalization. So we created this network. It's struggling right now, but because of COVID, we always struggle for funds. But this was set up by this thing. We have trained 81 doctors and 500 doctors have been sensitized, and their names and lists are on a website. So if you need somebody of our members to help you, they will be always ready to help you. This is our associations with IAP. ICANCL has a new logo, thanks to Professor Srivastav. We have the ICMEC Center with us, the ISPAN, we are their partners. We are partnered with several NGOs, more than 500 NGOs, which are linked to ICANCL group today. So, but the most important thing is you need to prevent this thing. Because, you know, with 400, and this is a pet topic of Professor Srivastav as well, and mine, that, you know, we have 440 million population, and you just can't afford to have the criminal justice system looking into it. So you need to be trained in the process of anticipatory guidance, and you need to have a multi-stakeholders, which is children, families, communities involved, because child protection and prevention is everybody's responsibility. And there's a new concept of positive parenting, which came out by a great study by Haldorsson in 2018, which is a new way of principles are basically we all knew, but it's been packaged in this way that effective and child-centered positive parenting includes child rights as the base, evidence-informed research inclusivity. And the best fight is the parents and children work together, and it's beneficial for both, for the parents as well as for the child. So there's less depression, less disruption in the child, less substance abuse and delinquencies, and benefits to the parents are less intimate partner violence, which is way up high in the COVID times. And the parents will find their less mental health challenges themselves. Prevention of sexual abuse needs anticipatory guidance, addressing personal safety and privacy information. It has well been researched that child after 3 years is competent developmentally to understand about what are the private parts. And you know, there are lots of things going on that some people say safe and unsafe touch. Now, safe and unsafe touch is an old terminology. We don't use it anymore. We thought of okay and not okay touch. And I see in the ISPAN, the best was Professor Martin Finkel. And I've spent weeks with him in his CARES Institute, learning child sexual abuse and examinations. So, you know, this is the way he's published in the Pediatrics and CAN International. So you use this word okay and not okay. Very important. They need to be taught that you don't keep secrets. If somebody touches your private parts, you tell 2 adults right away and not to hide from your parents. So essentially it's a collective responsibility, and 6 to 7 times the children will develop protective behavior if they have information and training on person safety and privacy information. I take you to COVID times because everything got closed with government lockdown. So I worked with a small NGO called BUDS, and Professor Srivastav with me is also one of the trustee in that. And we believed that we were working for last about 15 or I would say 16 years on marginalized communities of Old Delhi railway station, Nizamuddin railway station. There's a 15 lakhs population in that, and in the region of Mewat, we wanted to work in the villages. So ICANCL group did a conference on care of the rural child. So being the largest, and you know, COVID-19 epidemic took place, the only thing we realized that all we were getting कि खाना नहीं है, भूख लग रही है, parents की livelihood चली जाती है, migrant people are walking on the streets, going back to the home. So we started doing this research. We want to publish it. and hopefully, inshallah, we do this. But we wanted to determine, this was a research which was, we did on social and psychological and health impacts of COVID-19 in children besides other activities, we also run a mobile health van. We have 4 drop-in centers. We're trying to develop a 5th one in the northeast area of Delhi. We have resource centers for gender and education. We serve midday meals, and we do research on improving childhood immunizations by a mobile cellular technology. We have publications in this field and providing remedial education and holistic development so the child could be vocationally competent. This is a mobile van, fully furnished, and these are some of the inaugural times, the drop-in centers. These children may be poor, but they have a lot of smiles and they have resilience. We opened our PACE centers for gender and girls. Most of the street children that I saw in my initial part, like I've been running street children programs in Delhi for almost 20 years after I came to the US. But it's only in 2017 we started a Center for Girls Curriculum Education, PACE, with the NGO called Nirantar. And it's amazing that we were able to do research on these in this stressful times. 122 children had a rapid epidemiology assessment. We provided them relief, so it was easy to take their consents. And then we did in-depth semi-structured interviews of 50 young girls. And this study was, and I gave on shoulder that what we found that this pandemic, COVID pandemic, has put severe financial strains on the marginalized families. Hunger and loss of livelihood is one of the things. But what we found was gender discrepancies. The girls and women proportionately have more stress, they were more neglected, and there was more gender-based violence. Girls were more likely to contract other diseases and get boredom, but the boys at least had some more freedom. And the government rations were insufficient. Now, it took time for the government. So we were in connection with the government, and we're trying to do our best and reach out to these communities where we've been working for the last 15, 16 years. And we found high rates of anxiety, mental health, and depression. So we have, we see that's basically child rights agenda, actually. And I couldn't hold back this conversation. It's not, and targeted response and equity is needed, and child rights have to be. So Professor Srivastav, who's here in this team, he invited the IAP, and with Dr. Pemde and me, we went to the Ministry of Women and Child, and we met the secretary. We asked that why are the Anganwadis closed? Who's going to give food? Who's going to give midday meals? We are still waiting to hear from them. In between, while working in these slums, I developed COVID. Ashok knows I was hospitalized for 1 month. It took me 2 months to recover, and I'm glad this month, November, I'm fine. But for working in the nonprofit sector, if you stop working, your donors will not give you any money. And with this kind of times, so we need to continue working in the nonprofit sector. You need to continue. It's not that you all of you can find 1 day a week. I just give 1 day a week, and I see about 60 to 100 patients in the slums. Anyone, all of you can do that. There's nothing very heroic about this. Okay, so Childline is another agency that we have networked, and we found there was an increase in these calls, but they saw that violence was less, reporting of violence. But most of the calls to the Childline, and this is they are publishing this data, are mainly on nutrition, medical supports, and supplies. So you have to change your game plan. This is some of the photos. We did all social distancing. We have my personal car and the Buds van, and the drivers, we talked ICMR permission, government permission to go into these areas and give them all this thing. We have packets worth like 2,500 rupees rations given to almost 25,000 families up till now, and this process is still ongoing. The ration distribution has continued as of May, and additional supports, because the poor people don't know how to connect to internet. The construction workers they're getting 500 rupees a month, but who's going to fill their forms online? Pediatricians have to become social workers. And if this is a great opportunity that all of us need to. Kerala is also seeing, after a very good high prevalence of COVID cases. And wherever, don't be shy of spreading out. You have to get out and work in the communities. Look at the social determinants of health. If you want to work on child rights, Otherwise, it will be only a conference agenda. I welcome you anytime to Delhi, and we welcome you to our centers. This is Resource Center for Gender. And so far, last year, about 81 girls graduated and 31 got jobs as general duty assistant. 2 of them are becoming dialysis technicians. 5 of them become our drivers. And, I feel that I need to reach out to my communities and do whatever little I can do. And all of us can similarly do things in their own regions and contribute to prevention and addressing child rights. One thing which touches my heart all the time when I'm a doctor in these slums is I see these children being married so early. This is a major violence in the girls, and I can't stop talking about it, especially when a high prevalence of child marriage in the COVID times. And we have persistence of child marriage is really a social emergency. So when we tried to do a presentation with our Delhi local branch, the president at that time said that this is not a medical problem. But I tell you, this is a major public health problem, because if you have a small girl who gets married and produces a child below the age of 18, she's below the age of 18 and she produces a child, many times the child, she's not ready, so her body is not ready, so she'll get a baby who's preterm or IUGR. So whereas our health systems are so overloaded. And so I think what we need to focus on prevention. So, and the thing is that we all know the stories. You can say, okay, but this paper was published in Ocean Foundation Journal in New Orleans, and we got more respect. It's a part of the American Academy of American Medical Association part for CMEs and accreditations for doctors over there. But I don't know when I'm going to get this accredited for our own Medical Council of India. But social norms, structural norms, collective, these are important things which are happening in the communities. You as doctors can do so much. If you see a child who's in the 12 or 13 and not in school, you need to make sure this child is good, should go into the school. If a child continues on secondary education, there's a very little chance the child will be married as a girl early. Even boys should remain in schools and go for achieving even higher educations. And we can just simply say that. When I was president in IAP Delhi, we had this whole year programs on social pediatrics. Social pediatrics is one science that we need to all practice. You just give 1 day a week and you will see how your game is going to change. I welcome you to ISPAN. As Ashok has mentioned, this has been our good fortune that in 2011, we did the first international congress, which was the Asia Pacific Conference on Child Abuse and Neglect in Vigyan Bhavan, which Professor Srivastava and team, and he was a scientific advisor. You can see, that to do it in Vigyan Bhavan, you need Ministry of Women and Child's okay. And we had the leading ministers coming to this conference. This opened doors to us to meet about 600 professionals from 40 countries. And it led to India being positioned. And soon after that, there were so many media and other things, engagements. And then finally, this new law, the POCSO Act, was after the Nirbhaya gang rape was passed. Well, one thing I want to leave to your hearts is that you cannot save a girl child unless you focus and work on men and boys. The child protection strategy can only work. And this is the ISPAN research, it's on their website. I was a part of this. Men and adolescent boys, they are the major part of the problems. And you need to have the gender, the fathers need to be engaged, supported, and address the behavior. Patriarchy and the male dominance and the norms, gender inequities, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, which are perpetrated by men, have to be addressed. And society norms and traditional beliefs of male sexuality and sexual entitlements need to go through a change. So you need these primary prevention and in cultural mindsets. We have festivals of Rakhi and Tewar as a brother gets a Rakhi, you're supposed to protect. And we have straight girl cultures, but with the highest prevalence of child sexual abuse probably in the world. Again, in secrecy, and no week goes by when you don't find Hathras gang rape, Kashmir gang rape, whatever, everywhere. So, we need to support our country. Being pediatricians alone is not enough, but supporting a society through our knowledge. I tell you, Since I started working for the NGO setup, I get so much insights in working with people who are not doctors, but still interested in children. And so working in a multidisciplinary approach and addressing child abuse and neglect as a public health approach is my dream. And I need your support. I need your support also from the policymakers, law resource, and well-trained people. And the ICANCL group cannot struggle in a vacuum. All the pediatricians from all over the country need to give 1 day a week, and we will make a change for the nation's children. We need multidisciplinary inputs. You cannot call yourself the big, great doctor. You need to lead work with social workers, counselors, nurses, and all kinds of allied to provide comprehensive medical care. And with this book, a little bit, your handbook, you know what are the SOPs and what you need to do. You are the first point of contact, but you may not be all the time. But if you have a great child protection team, you can do wonders. Please join ISPAN. I am duty bound to show this slide to you. On December 7th, I'm going to be taking as a global president, the first time, I think, humbly telling you, first time in India, in 44 years of existence of ISPAN is going to take place. And thank you very much, Professor Srivastava, who nominated me to the board. And I think all the other people who, I don't want to have any credit for this. This credit is entirely yours. I am a person who really wants to take child abuse and neglect nationwide in the hands of young upcoming pediatricians, such as many of you in this organization. And no matter what you can be a super specialist, you can be a nephrologist, cardiologist, gastroenterologist, and intensive care, and do all that, but give 1 day a week to the community. That's the key message. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Seth, for an excellent presentation on details of child abuse. Hats off you, sir. After the COVID problem, also you are back in the, I think you are back in the increased vigor now.
Oh yeah. You know, if God has saved me, when I was having COVID, I did not know whether I'm going to be dead or alive. Okay, but if God has made me live, there may be a purpose.
Yes, sir. We promise you that IAP Kerala will be with you for next so many years. Now, shall I take a couple of questions?
Sure.
There came up here. Now, one question from Dr. Meena is, the teacher who fondles the students, did that case goes to the court? What punishment will the teacher gets?
Okay, so let me tell you, you know, the point is that in this question, when you ask this question, I respect you for asking this question, but you know, you are talking of punishment right now. What you have to do is you have to do things right. You have to document, and 95% of the sexual abuse is diagnosed by history alone. So you need to maintain a medical legal register in your clinic, and you need to have maybe a duplicate, maybe a carbon copy, one you give of your prescription, and you write your history in that. Simply putting a history there, what was revealed by the child, by the family, or whatever, is the most important thing. Then once you put a report to the police, is now the police will have to intervene. Many times there is so much out of court settlement, the case doesn't go. Ashok knows it all the well. But the thing is that that's not your business. Your business and your response to child sexual abuse is to report to the legal authorities. It's a cognizant. If you don't report, you could be in jail. Okay. Now, I'm now coming to your question. Now this goes to the case, goes to the court. Let me tell you your evidence. Now, when there's a fondling, there's no reason for you to do a detailed child sexual examination. Like, you're not going to see, the child is already so much traumatized. You're not going to see her private parts, and you're not going to take any photographs. Okay, and for everything you need a proper consent, and I couldn't cover child sexual abuse. If you give me a day, I can maybe, but can't do it in this small. But so when this goes to the court, it's the law to take its own course. Okay, your evidence of your history will put this child offenders behind bars. Believe me.
Another question is regarding consent. After what age we require consent for child for examination? I think this is a topic which is not.
It's a very good question. See, according to the Indian Penal Code, those things, laws apply. If the child is over 12 years, the child, him or her, remember, child sexual abuse occurs equally in boys and girls. So if the child is over 12 years, the boy or girl will give the consent, him or herself, okay, for examination. But if the child is less than 12 years, you will have to get the guardian and parents' consent. But I have not told you, there are interesting situations where the father is a culprit. So when this happens, how you going to manage, what are different clinical scenarios, you can come to our workshops, we'll give you enough scenarios to understand. There could be variations of all this. So the 12 years is a cutting off age. But remember, the child has to be over 18, okay, before they can give consent for medical termination of pregnancy. And those are considered, your question of child sexual abuse. 12 years is a cutoff point. Thank you.
There is a long question. It's, by Dr. Divya. Unlike in the West, the pattern of incidents of child abuse is different here. And what she wanted is that most mild cases can be successfully managed by involvement of school teacher or social service. Should we consider only the severe cases? I think the POCSO says every case has to be.
No. It's very clear. If there's a little bit mild or moderate, there's no definition as such. You know, child pornography is a crime. Okay, fondling the child is a crime. Quantum of punishment will be less. And what do you mean by severe? Are you meaning only penetrative sexual? You can't use the word rape, by the way, today in legal, as a doctor. It's a legal term. So are you meaning only that you will be in charge of the penetrative sexual assault and not take care of the non-penetrative? It's well known that if you let the abuser continue, the non-penetrative sexual intercourse leads to penetrative sexual intercourse, and you can get a severe grievous injuries to these children. So it's whether it's a mild, moderate, severe, whichever way you define it yourself, you need to report.
Then there is one question by Dr. Gangadharan. The age of marriage of girls is going to be raised to 21. Will you change the age of child abuse accordingly? I think it is something which is related to the legal side.
These are theoretical questions. Let them try to do that. You see, all the India's laws are not being aligned to the UN Child Rights Convention, where the age of the child is 18. So I tell you, let them try to do that. Okay, we'll talk about that at that stage, because there are enough child rights activists to not allow that to happen.
Another question is, what can be done if the parents are not allowing the child to open up in the outpatient while being asked about the question, of the parents are not willing to
So this can usually happen when one of the parents is himself an abuser. So you have to play smart. One of the ways, the strategy that we advise in our training is you tell supposing you suspect that this is a 7-year girl and you expect that the father is a sexual abuser. So what you do is, if he's not doing it, there are different ways you could handle. You can, if you're in a hospital setup, you can do it differently in your solar centers. You can tell the father to give him a prescription and tell him this urgent medicine is immediately needed right now. Can you just go and get it? And then you will have privacy with this mother who is not the offender. And then maybe you can get some history. Ideally, it will be great if you can just speak to the child all by, these children, why, there are studies to show the paper published in pediatrics. I can tell you, because you are a doctor. This was told by a 4-year-old girl. Children have a lot of respect and regard for the white coat. Please believe me, you need to exercise your judgment. But the one thing is that you should never do is to re-traumatize these child. In order to, if the child is not ready, the parents, if you have a mildest suspicion, you need to report. If you're practicing in the USC, I trained in the US. After my training in AIMS, I did my American boards in pediatrics. I did a neonatal training, but I don't practice neonatology. I practice social and child abuse pediatrics now. I've never formally trained in child abuse pediatrics, but I'm learning it. But, essentially, it's up to your, the laws are binding to doctors. With the POCSO Act coming in, I mean, you cannot ignore the law. Anything else?
Dr. Bennet has a doubt when you see the suspicion. If we report on suspicion and it will turn out to be negative, then is there any problem with us?
Yeah, not at all. In fact, if you, and you know, it's a good practice that if you find that you want to report a suspicion, it's a good practice to tell the families that you're duty bound to report by law. Okay. And that if it is proved by investigation, you know, you are doctors, you are one part of the puzzle. There are so many, it's a big puzzle and there are different parts to it, the social part, legal part. The point is immediately doctors become judgmental and they jump into who's the criminal, and you become the lawyer and the investigator and the policeman, everything. You can't do that. Your job is to report. And if you report and later on is found there was no sexual abuse, nobody is going to punish you. But if it is found that it was sexual abuse and you missed to report, you could be penalized for 6 months in jail and 20 or 30,000 rupees fine.
Now, shall I request Dr. Srivastava sir for his comments? Sir, please.
Thank you very much. A very comprehensive and very learned, knowledgeable talk. I wish there were maybe about 1,000 Rajeev Seths in our country. Make a difference. We don't. We have only one, but there will be more. What I want to mention is the attitudes of the society. They are very, very adverse towards children's abuse and physical abuse and all that. We say every day on, children being abused, beaten, nobody does anything. I think the adverse attitudes have to be overcome by advocacy. We have to somehow interact with teachers, lawyers, and all the educated men in the community, all the persons. Now, take religious leaders. Have you ever heard or seen any big religious leaders talk about children? No, they will talk about different things. I think we have tried to do a little bit, but it's very difficult. But I think as pediatricians, we must react with school teachers, school have meetings in the schools and try to get other people in our fold and somehow to, advocacy is extremely important. But even the politicians never talk about children once or twice, but all the lawyers, all the policies are not child friendly. Thank you. I'll say no more after now.
Thank you.
There is one last question that which I saw just now only. Child abuse is underreported as police station is as a place people hesitate to go. So that is it a reason why it is reported? I think it is not that we have to do it from our side. What's your say on that?
I'm sorry, the question I couldn't get. Can you clarify the question?
They say that the question is police station being a place where people are hesitant to go. That is why the underreporting is taking place.
Yeah, not at all, dear. You just have to call, the police. There's a beat constable who will do the needful. You don't have to go to the police station. Forget about all that. Times have changed. They say you can even email them if you know the email of that person. You have to report. Okay. If you are not interested in doing anything else, call 1098. There's a working in your city also, I know, and they will do the needful for you. But you need to maintain a good history. The childline professionals are not pediatricians like you are. So you need to keep a record. Now, if you give a good history of what the child after 20, even 10, after 1 year or 2 years, the POXO, the cases that they're going to fast track in 1 year. We know it is not happening. But even if this case goes to court in 2 years, your testimony of your history will punish the offender of this crime.
Okay. Dr. Lalitha madam, any comments? Dr. Lalitha Kailas?
No, Ashok. Actually, Rajeev, it was really a brilliant lecture regarding the child rights. But I think even as all of us pediatricians are very aware about the child rights, as you have rightly pointed out, we are often reluctant to shy away from our responsibilities. I think there have to be a change for that. Maybe your talk like this and activities will definitely bring forward a change.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. I think the message from senior pediatricians such as you should be that addressing the social determinants of health is very important. You can't solve the public health challenges of the country till you actually address the social determinants of health. And physicians and pediatricians, a part of training, need to work in the slums and marginalized communities, and probably later on sensitized to at least give 1 day of their time to half a day of their time to serving. And if you don't serve, you don't come to know. If you don't have the, so when we started, when I came from the US, there was nobody threw me out, sorry to say. My father was sick and he had cancer and we came out. I didn't have a job. The AIMS professor gave me some ad hoc appointment, which I didn't want to take. So I started working for NGO, and that's how I got into this movement. And when I met Dr. Srivastava in Apollo Hospital, he said that we have this group, and we developed this group. This was registered legally. We have all the, due diligences. We have a website, we have interaction, and we need all your support to be us. Professor Sandhya Katse is the current chairman of the group, along with Professor Uma Naik and Dr. Anjali Saxena are the joint secretary treasurer. Write to us, just email us. We would like you to become members. Ashok, you must get all the IAP Keralas to become a member.
Yeah, I'm trying. I think I will give a minute to Dr. Venkatesavan, my colleague, good colleague, who is working with me for against child abuse. Oh, Venkatesavan, your comments, unmute and say. Unmute and.
Thank you, Dr. Ashok. Thank you. The presentation was excellent, but in between I was not able to completely attend this because I had an emergency. Anyway, we are doing a lot of work on this. I think Rajeev sir, that Kerala become one of the model state in protecting the child rights as you advise. And I think the child line is bit overreacting on the even the slightest rumor they are getting. Because we had so many incidences, Ashok will be better known.
Yeah, so you're right, absolutely right, sir. It's not that the child line is overreacting. If you look at the reactions of the poor and the marginalized, I think we need to focus on that. Government lockdown led to disaster at the slums. The livelihoods were lost. One of the things that we found in our practice was that the landlords were vacating these tenants who are daily wage laborers. Children of construction workers had nothing to eat. Okay, now you can blame the child line and agencies who are responding. Okay, but I think you must realize this problem and it still continues to be intense. Don't you think, as pediatrician, Dr. Venkatesavan, you should reach to your secretary and find out why the Anganwadis, when are they going to open? Children under 6 years are not being fed. The midday meals are not being served in the schools. They're more important for the poor. So I think before we criticize child line and their hyper responses or whatever, we need to look within and do some soul searching ourselves. The problem lies in neglect. Right now, there's immense. When this lockdown happened, children were not getting vaccinations. The bread and butter of all the pediatricians was vaccinations. How many of you actually went and ensured that the vaccinations were given timely in the slums, in this thing? So now after 2 or 3 months, the government gave this guideline. So at least the vaccination is important. You must get it. Okay. Everyone is waiting for COVID vaccine to come up. And the COVID vaccine, whenever it comes, until 30% to 40% of everybody is immunized to get a herd immunity, the COVID is not going to go away. This disease is a humanitarian disaster, pandemic, occurs once in 100 years or whatever. If all of us join hands and we work in one voice for the poor and the marginalized, I think we're going to achieve a lot.
I think we'll start discussing with Dr. Rajeev. We'll go on and on and on. I think we have to stop somewhere.
Okay.
Priya, can we wind up? Yeah, thank you, Dr. Rajeev.
Thank you. God bless you.
And if you are free tomorrow, we have another.
Sure, send me the link. I'll be there.
I purposefully invited the BOXO judge, who is presently the member secretary of the State Legal Service Society, so that we can work out with him to do some projects in different level.
Sure. So on the 4th of December, if you're interested, the Delhi legislative, or the legal authority has invited me to give a presentation of violence against children. Okay, I can give you a link. There's so much. If you tell me that you have members of ICANCL group here. We'll send you our links, please.
Okay.
There's so much to do together. Let's join hands. Thank you. Thank you, IAP.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Trivandrum Branch, for
Thank you.
hosting the event. Over to Priya for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let me express my vote of thanks. First of all, let me express my vote of thanks to Narayanan sir for his presidential address and for giving IAP Trivandrum an opportunity and a slot to conduct a program in this Child Rights Week of IAP Kerala. And let me thank Anandakesavan sir, Bala sir, TP Jayaraman sir for their felicitations. And special thanks for the efforts taken by Rajeev Seth sir by spending his valuable time with us and giving us an excellent talk. It was really truly enlightening talk, sir. It was just like an oration, actually.
Oh, so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Bye. I'm in love with Kerala, so I'm going to come again. Thank you.
Yes,
Bye.
Huge thanks to Ashok Kumar sir for chairing this session and giving us valuable inputs. And I thank team IAP Trivandrum and our own Bennet sir who coordinated this program completely. He coordinated this program. And Dr. Praveen for his excellent flyers. And I thank the senior pediatricians, senior teachers, Lalita Madam, Srivastava sir, Venkateshwaran sir, and all the delegates for spending your valuable time with us with IAP Trivandrum. Thank you all. And with your permission, let me close this session.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night, Ashok sir.
Right.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night, Srivastava.
Bye, sir.
Congrats, Dr. Ashok, Dr. Bennett.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.